I felt it was, for the first time, something totally unique.
A monster is a good guy, and he fights monsters, then I pretty much achieved my lifelong goal of doing nothing but drawing monsters.
Something that combined the superhero action genre with a much more human approach, and at the same time had the trappings of a great gothic fantasy full of monsters, full of adventures in subterranean areas and so forth. And I was instantly in love with it.
I've always enjoyed reading old folklore and legends and ghost stories, and I wanted that kind of stuff, but I love, old monster comics, real, the Jack Kirby Marvel comics. I was going to a convention and they were going to have a little program book and they wanted a drawing, and I didn't want to draw, one of the regular superhero characters, so I thought, well, I'll just draw this big monster. And he had some kind of belt or something on, and there was this big belt buckle kind of shape, and it just thought, well, I need something there, and so I just wrote Hellboy.
I had been pursuing Mike for a number of years to come over to Dark Horse and publish with us. He had published with a number of other companies. And finally, we were at a convention and he told me that he had a great idea. The name of his idea was Hellboy. And we thought, wow, can't wait to see this.
I'd been working as an artist in comics for about 10 years, and I just started to plot a couple of my own stories. I'd never really done any writing. And I thought, the one thing I haven't done is try to make my own book out of the stuff I've always been interested in. And I really thought, I'll do this once, I'll never get a shot at doing it again, but at least after, somewhere down the road, after I've had to draw God knows what, I'd always have this one thing to look back on and say, at least once I put all my stuff together and made this thing that's mine. The only name I'd ever come up with that I liked was Hellboy. And I'd drawn this kind of monster character once or twice when people would come up to me and say, just draw whatever you want. I'd draw this kind of a monster with a tail. And I just thought, well, I got the thing I like, and I got the name I like, and we'll give it a shot. And that's what it was. Certainly never thought I'd be drawing it still 10 years later. So he's the good monster who was supposed to be the bad monster, and now you turn him loose on the bad monsters.
So imagine, in a sense, if the X-Files were investigated by an X-File themselves. It's almost like a creature that has to fight creatures, and in that he becomes, or tries to fool himself that he becomes more human by doing that.
Yeah, he's the good guy. He's a monster that's been raised among humans, so he thinks of himself as just one of the guys, and the last thing he wants to find out is that he's, the beast of the apocalypse.
One of the keys to the comic is to understand that even although Hellboy is 6'5", bright red, has horns and a tail and all that, he's a regular Joe. He's a blue-collar, hard-working guy. His job just happens to be a monster hunter, but he's a really blue-collar guy. Nothing mysterious about him. He likes pizza, he likes beer, he likes watching football on TV.
Hellboy, in a way, is modeled a little bit on my dad, because he worked in a cabinet shop, and he would always come home from a long day at work with, sawdust all over him, and always big nasty gashes on his hands. Oh, I got my hand stuck in this machine. It was just real matter of fact, and he just said, this is the toughest monkey out there. He does all these horrifying things, pulling nails out of other guys' thumbs and stuff, and he comes home not real nonchalant, goes out and gets a beer and works in the yard. And I think a lot of that went into the way I imagined Hellboy.
Decided to take Hellboy out, even though it seemed probably one of the tougher concepts to get a studio executive to believe in. I had done several projects with Larry Gordon, and so I brought it to Larry and Lloyd, and we decided to go out and try to set the project up.
I never gave the movie any thought. I never thought it would be made. with very good reason. You know, who's going to make something called Hellboy?
I really thought it was visually so rich and so powerful, and I wanted to try and translate some of the characters and the images to film.
We were introduced to Guillermo about 6 years ago. His love and understanding of the comic book was equal to Mike Mignola's, as if somehow he was somehow in the room with Mike when the comic book was created.
We took him up to Portland and introduced him to Mike Mignola, the comics creator, and the two have had a love affair ever since.
This is where Hellboy comes from. That's where Hellboy comes from.
When we met and we talked about it, it was very clear to me that this was probably the only guy who could make the movie. I'd seen Guillermo's, some of his movies. I loved what he did. I love that he brings his own personality to a picture. And I said, from day one, I said, change whatever you want to change. Make it your version of my thing.
I didn't want to do a carbon copy of anything. The movie is its own creature. The movie is not the comic, but it's a great sort of a jazz riff on what the comic is. Usually this type of movies are done through the eyes of a guy that is new to the organization, and therefore you have a high quotient of exposition moments seen through eyes that are very fresh.
Myers was written as a way to bring the audience into the world of Hellboy. I think his involvement in the tapestry of the story becomes much more complex and interesting.
What I also wanted was for actually this character to start being a monkey wrench in some of the cogwheels of the story. He becomes a third man in a relationship between Hellboy and Liz.
He played up the father-son relationship. He brought in a love interest, which I didn't even, not only did I not hint at it, I never even saw it as being there. He brought that in, and he brought a three-dimensional quality to these characters.
Hellboy, Broom, and Liz are in their relationships very different from the comic. Cronin is more or less sort of a meek Nazi in a gas mask in the comic. Here he's a killing machine.
Cronin, while a lot of his physical appearance is based on my character, he's a real Del Toro character. It's really interesting, the scenes where Hellboy and him duke it out. It's like watching a Mike Mignola character fight it out with a Guillermo del Toro character. We have a really interesting Mignola del Toro collaboration, as opposed to somebody just trying to second guess me or somebody doing a completely different picture, ignoring me entirely. There's a lot of me in there. There's a lot of things that are different, but it's very true to the spirit of my stuff, because he's a huge fan of what I do.
I am a big fan of Mike. To this day, he's one of my heroes. I said to him, I don't want you to think this is my movie and that's it. This is our movie. You're a partner and I'm the director, but you are the creator of the characters and the world.
Mike, what did you do today?
I dropped my phone in the toilet.
And is it fixed?
Came back to life to taunt me and then it went away.
But at least you had some design successes.
No, I do crap all day. I'm incapable of drawing Ron Perlman based on a photograph of Ron Perlman as Hellboy.
But of course, you are the most logical choice to do the Hellboy version of Ron Perlman.
You'd think. Where's Tim Bradstreet when you need him? And look at the hand.
I have one.
Yeah, I've got a pile of mine.
I have one in Austin, but it's not enough.
And I was saying to Wayne, if pattern that thing on Sandmail with some of these same kind of shapes, so it kind of relates them a little bit.
And then I
would echo it here too.
Oh,
I had an
think
idea
just
too.
to play opposite that, I think it's.
I tell you this, since he's gonna be chest naked only once, this can be confusing. And like, is it a scar?
Well, I think that's cool. Not to be confusing. But
It's your confusing design.
it's your confusing movie. Oh!
No, if we're gonna do this, I'd rather do it on this arm than on the chest. Like it went down a little bit.
I thought about that, just picking up a swirl. It gets that Celtic
That's it.
armband.
Yeah, you could even get something here, but no more than
Oh,
that.
yeah. How about something like it kind of comes up the back? And
That's fine.
Okay.
Mike actually did a sketch of the glyphs that are like in his stone arm but travel up onto his own arm, up to his shoulder. So he had just kind of sketched that on a little toy of Hellboy.
This is the idea for the body.
Hellboy was actually something that I was a fan of, and went to Matt and said, look at this comic, it's really cool. As soon as he saw it, Matt fell in love with it. Chad had found this comic book, Hellboy, and he showed it to me. He said, Matt, you gotta read this thing. And I'm not really into comic books, and Chad is. And so I picked it up, started reading it, and just fell in love with it. It's just so great. And then I found out that Guillermo was making a film of it, and Chad and I decided we gotta get a hold of this movie. The first thing that we did was more of a figure piece, just to get an overall feeling from the comic, and again, just get a feel for something in 3D. And just did a miniature version of Hellboy. The bust itself, Matt had done on Ron Perlman cast. It was down in our basement, so Matt pulled it out in like 3 hours and pretty much nailed it. Because we were thinking the only person to play it would be Ron Perlman, so went down in the basement at Rick Baker's and got a life cast out of Ron's from Beauty and the Beast, and just started knocking out a sculpture, see what come out.
And I know the wardrobe has a lot to do with wrapping and the mannequins. On the shoulder line is stronger there.
This is the first one I did. I don't know if it helps you to see some of the color.
That is closer, actually.
That was Ron that much younger, so there were some problems later when you got the real Ron now, but Matt was still able to nail the same look, because Guillermo was so particular about having that exact look of the bust, but Matt pulled it off, nailed it.
Essentially, he's asymmetric. He's really up on one side, and the other side is his fighting side. Now, the other thing, and I know this is hard to come through, but the sunken chest, it's almost, it has more negative, and it also, it's taut. It's not so much that the ribs are, it's almost like it's hollowed out.
I think it begins with Hellboy's right hand of doom. You know, he's already asymmetrical, and so that theme carries over into the other characters a little more subtly. Samael has one eye on one side and two eyes on the other. He also has subtle differences, like one of his arms is a little bit smaller than the other one, and so on. You know, and I think that makes it a little more interesting as a character too. Symmetry is not a good thing when it comes to creatures and monsters, you know, or even individuals, people.
When that thing disengages, that arm becomes a little thin. And if it were a bit more, you know, the Popeye arm.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Can we give it more mass this side? Yeah.
Almost like a lobster claw.
Yeah, or a crab.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, man, calm down. It's ridiculous. It's like Cinderella. Calm down. like with a little tear in your eye. Calm down.
It's beautiful. Who sculpted this?
This is Jose Fernandez.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, he really is a beautiful sculptor. He does amazing work. Oh. Yeah, that's what
I'm
Jose
ugly and
sculptors.
fat. Look at him. God.
Yeah, he is.
We used the information that Guillermo had given us and the artistic abilities of Jose to really nail the maquette on the first treatment.
Concave chest, more or less.
Concave, or just do something that changes the human proportion. Here, the tentacles will get rid of that. The arms we will get rid of. Them being so long. make them thinner, probably.
Oh, this seems like an odd
Yeah.
shape,
No,
but
we-
once this stuff is kind of wrapped up around it, it's gonna be great.
will very unlikely approach this creature from this angle.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I tell you! Stop it! You childish imp!
For the sequence with Behemoth, we came up with some conceptual art that was done by Carlos Huante and showed that to Guillermo. And the first pass, again, he really loved. It's like, I think Carlos did like 5 or 6 drawings of Behemoth, and there was one that looked exactly like what ended up in the film. And that was the one that Guillermo just said, that's it, that's the one, let's make this one. So then our job was to create a maquette, probably like a 1/10 or a much smaller maquette, for the Tippett people to go in and build and model based on the maquette.
Make this one shorter. You know?
Right.
So that we can really get a good look at
yeah.
it.
So it's not, because this is gonna be too much like what we've already
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah, just make them shorter like this.
That's cool. With the spikes and everything, right?
Yeah, with the spikes and these are like
Suction cups.
Like, well, it's like insects have the each one thing has one pushes, one grinds.
Right.
This would be the grinders. The others would be the pushers.
Yeah.
It's just great. It's great that someone pays attention to how much work we put into this stuff, because mostly they don't.
No. Thank you. Is this on? Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming today, and I want to welcome you. We wanted to, number one, give you a really bitchin' poster, which I hope you guys got. Because the other thing we wanted to do was to make that event special. One of the things we wanted to do, we didn't want to make stinky keychains or, postcard that you wipe your ass with and stuff like that. We wanted to give you something that
Although you're welcome to if you...
you can wipe your ass many times with the poster. It lasts a year. And we wanted to give you something that me as a geek would lust after. We wanted to give you something that I felt was a collectible.
Always make a model. I think it tells a lot of stories. It tells the scale, it tells the size. You can see it as a three-dimensional thing. We also have a little mini camera, which is very useful, which we plug into a television set. You can wander it through the set as though it were a real film camera, through the model set as though it were a real film camera. That gives you an idea, again, of the scale and whether you can get the shots and so forth. It always helps to have these ideas, because you're going on the right, you're going along the right path. Mike, Mignola, and Guillermo had been talking about it for many times prior to me arriving on the picture. So it's good to have the right direction when you start. And Mike did a number of visuals for the Abbey ruins, and we collated them together, put them together. And so I took some of his ideas and sketches and then reworked them into a more practical set.
One of the first challenges that Guillermo and Patrick Palmer, our executive producer, laid out for me was to do as much as we possibly could physically on set. So to answer this big question mark out there of what we could actually do, we rented a soundstage, built flying systems. We had 8 special harnesses made just for these 2 characters, Samuel and Hellboy. We had them custom fit, measured, sized, with what we call pick points, places that we can attach cables to these harnesses, just multiple pick points on these harnesses, because we didn't know how they were going to balance, how once these guys went airborne, they were going to hang. It was just this huge question mark out there.
And we actually hung Ron just to start getting a sense of what he would be capable of, what he wanted to do, what he was not interested in doing, et cetera, et cetera. And for the most part, he's been gung-ho for it.
So we spent 5 days on a soundstage in January at Paramount just testing, just literally picking them up off the ground and seeing if they turned over, if they fell to their feet, if they fell to their head, how they reacted when we actually launched them for long distances, and had a pretty good, you know, like I say, a pretty good test with these things, and learned a lot that week. It was very encouraging because, amazingly enough, there's a lot that we can do with this Samuel outfit, this suit that Mike Elizalde and the guys have built.
I got it!
It also is about creating the conditions and the atmosphere for a character like that to belong, and that he becomes just another character in the movie. It's not this thing on red that pops and stays sort of artificial to the world. And so among all these things was create the conditions for him to walk in and out of a room, and you can buy it, that you can actually feel he's there and you can relate to him. We found some lighting procedures, let's say, that would fit Hellboy better, and that has to do with taking care of not giving away how the makeup is, or how the look of Hellboy in the comic can translate better. So it's a strongly shaped face with where the shadows and the highlights play a very, very strong role, and that becomes very much his personality. It's been helped by the very good work of makeup on Hellboy and the other characters that are made up. I think the art of Hellboy is very sophisticated and very strong. It's a very determined light and palette of colors, and it's not I don't find it a regular comic book in that sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We have patterns of wig. Here we go. Full rehearsal, please. We're going to add one more beat at the end where he does like the ironic smile when he says there's not such a thing. We can compress it to that, and that's when you need to be here.
My first day on the set was John Hurt's first day of working, and he looks so much like the character in the comic.
To the point that even I was thinking for a second, when I drew this character, was I thinking of John Hurt? Was I looking at a photo of John Hurt? I wasn't. I just drew this guy.
John Hurt, he's a treasure, and an actor of amazing ability, with a body of work behind him that's staggering, and the fact that he was the guy I get to call Pop, you know, was one of the great perks of being in this film.
Father. We were very happy to be able to get him. He's truly, you know, one of the best and most classy actors you can ever encounter, and him taking the role makes a big difference for me, because the emotional core of Hellboy, aside from the love story, is the father and son relationship that exists, and John Hurt brings a lot of emotional depth to the table.
This is a kind of film that I've never made. The nearest, I suppose, I've made is Alien, but it's really not the same. And I've always held the view that if I don't mind what I do, so long as I think that it stands the chance of succeeding on the level that it is intended to succeed on. And I thought this did.
Professor Broom in the comic has a real small role. He's real important because he's the guy who's there, who knows something's going on, and he's the guy who picks up Hellboy when he first shows up. And the way it was in the comic, you saw this in the flashback of the World War II stuff. You cut ahead to pretty much his last hour of being alive. So he's certainly expanded on in the movie. But the way he's handled in the movie is the way I would have handled it if I'd thought of giving this guy more screen time.
I think Broom has a very essential loneliness that he reflects on the kid. Broom is an oddball, you know, he's an odd character, and he's out of place in the world. And when he sees this kid with innocent eyes, big innocent eyes, all wet like a puppy, and he just, you know, projects onto him all the loneliness and sort of odd existence he himself leads. He makes Hellboy understand that even the most incredible, odd creature in life has a purpose.
Mike? Mike, please.
Hey, where you going?
Red.
Red? Red? You call him Red? I gotta read this script. I bet it's good. Stop space!
Hey, marker. You mark.
60 feet further, comrade! 3 rows. Security van, human copy.
Go that way, red monkey.
No, but with the puppet, we're gonna do my coverage now.
It's your friend.
Okay.
And what prints were you on?
Thank you, Ron. Okay, fellas, good work.
Thanks, Ron.
Now, we really get the picture.
Oh, yeah. It's true.
Okay, go to F.
Thank you.
As far as real-world reference, there was a little bit of reference done to the Bog people, some reference to the mummies of Guanajuato, but mostly of the Capuchin monks of Italy.
That's right.
Yes, which are these mummified monks in this monastery in Italy that are just about from the right era and the right level of
decay.
Right, mummification, if you will. He has eyebrows, as you can see, that are quite expressive. On his mouth, we have obviously articulated lips, and we also have articulated chin, which is surprisingly important. You don't really think about someone's chin moving, but you miss it if it's not there. And his jaw can move in and out, as well as up and down, which helps him to enunciate certain words, which is important since he has no lips, really. And there's that tongue, also.
And his tail wags. He's got a articulated tailbone that moves around as well.
Okay.
Go to the gravestone. There you'll find sanctuary.
But this, fans of Mignola's work will, I'm sure, be really happy with this character. It looks just like it stepped off the page.
Yeah.
It's really quite amazing.
Very good. And
Cast is wrapped. Thank you very much.
Bravo!
We wrap to the trucks and then make a move over to the church.
The cemetery has finished the movie!
I could start out the scene with...
You're very romantic.
Back so soon?
Up here.
Want to wash down my lithium pills? May get a few perks, HB, but I'm still a patient.
I think I'm really lucky in that Liz doesn't have a huge part in a comic book because I really get to, just create a girl from scratch. Or Guillermo gets to create this girl how we envisioned her. I'm not dressing like the girl in the comic book because it was just a bit too grown up and a bit, just in a framework, of, it would just have to be kind of these still broad strokes that we're given if we went with the comic book version.
I've had nothing to do with her in the comic. I mean, she's been in the comic. She showed up in the very first story, but to call her one-dimensional in the comic, well, actually, maybe she's not quite one-dimensional, but Guillermo just took what I gave, this skeletal thing, and he just infused it with a personality. And again, brought in the love interest angle, which I didn't see that coming. For Liz, Guillermo and I tossed names back and forth over the years, but there was never a time where we said, it really needs to be this, or it really needs to be that. So he just said one day, Selma Blair, and I said, that'd be great.
I felt that she could bring all that beauty that she has physically and all that angst that she's capable of projecting on the screen to a character that is both beautiful and flawed. And she's an incredible actress with a great range.
Liz is such a different character for me than anyone I've played. She's not necessarily likable. None of these superheroes are superheroes in the way that they're sexy in the way that we normally think of, the lycra and the bodies and this. They're really flawed, they're kind of tragically flawed human beings. I actually read Hellboy after I decided to do the project right away, and I think they're the most beautiful comics I'd ever looked at. Mike Mignola is such a master, and so now I'm a huge Hellboy fan, and I have Hellboy and everything, and Hellboy on my shoes, and Hellboy stickers everywhere. It has a real cult following. So I don't know. I hope I do Liz justice.
Come back, Liz. Come
God,
back.
no. No, not this time, HB. I hate being locked up here, but I can't be there. Good night.
Yeah, I gotta go too. Instead of for hold longer. It'd be great if I could just land like a cat, hold it for a second, figure out my next move, and then.
There it is. Hey, Marka. Hey, Mom.
See, Mark.
3, 2, 1, action!
Cut.
The only thing I can think of is we changed something on Jimmy. Can you just hang back a step or two? Can you try to do them up? What became known as the West Side Highway sequence was a huge challenge. The trickiest part for us stunt-wise was the part of the sequence where Hellboy, chasing Samuel, has to leap up onto a trailer, run across the trailer, jump off the trailer, over the cab of the truck, land on his feet, and continue on as if he had jumped over a small log running down a path. It took us a couple days. We brought in some cranes. We built a big flying system over the top of this, and we got it done, but it was, again, a challenge. And we were shooting at night with a huge crowd, cameras everywhere, which you come to expect on a Guillermo del Toro picture.
Jimmy Hart, for the most part, has done a lot of the big stunts, a lot of the big wire gags. Guillermo del Toro is just really comfortable with Jimmy. He knows Jimmy. He knows Jimmy's always going to deliver.
I've mainly been doing the wire work, a lot of wire work, air ramps, ratchets, decelerators, just all along, all the fun stunts I get to do. Most of the work I'm doing, I'm harnessed up, so I've got a jerk vest harness. And then the great thing about this show is that it's pretty wardrobe extensive, so I'm able to put on as many pads as you could want, and you never can see them, from the big thick jacket to the muscle suit. So it's kind of a stuntman's dream to not be restricted by wardrobe.
He does have a very thick, what we've ended up calling the muscle suit, that just bulks him up. But it hasn't been a major problem. We just, you know, attaching cables to the harnesses underneath the suit, just cutting holes here and there. That's been about it. And then, of course, the big leather jacket that he wears on the outside. I mean, he never takes that jacket off. So every time he goes flying, he's got that jacket on, and we've basically made that leather jacket look like Swiss cheese by the end of the show.
Not ready. All right, that's it.
Now, that way. Nobody died, really. Run as fast as you can that way. Here. Okay. Roar! Yeah! Upscaled, TK2! TK2!
Again. I look thin with this costume.
It was fantastic, masterful. Basically, it was run so I don't trip over you. And try not to look like an idiot, which in this suit is, of course, impossible.
Yeah, you were overacting like crazy.
Hey, Nick. This guy in the truck, does he have a license?
Okay, guys, settle, quiet, fall back.
Lori wants to... Just to be clear, I've already hit it. Now it's
You've
just...
already hit it. You've already hit it. And the car is acting as a wipe, a massive wipe. You're just doing like this. That's it. Let it spin once.
Turn around, Ron, see what's coming at you.
I know it's daunting. Kind of unnerving.
Well, you know, when I used to be a carny and I operated a Ferris wheel, it was just like this.
And pull it. Roll. And spin it. Spin it. Go. Pull it, guys.
And then the beginning of the show was the West Side Highway sequence. And West Side Highway was cool because, you know, we had to make these cars, we had to make these set extensions, we had to make this city that didn't exist.
I would say 80% of the cars that you would see around it, like you would see like a Beetle, or you would see like the end of a car going something. It was something to populate the scene. Those were all fake. And then anytime you saw a building, I would say that was probably a set extension building too. In the plate, you will see you're going to see a carousel and like a brick building. That was real. And then again, everything else around it was just kind of put in there to fill up, to make it look as if it's a full kind of busy city. For the truck flipping part, that one shot with like 12 cameras. I mean, they made sure they got that covered, and from every angle that car flipping thing was covered. And we had to augment it by you know, they didn't want to expose Ron Perlman to it, so like he was actually punching at nothing for one pass, and then they had a clean plate, and then they had the car just coming up and doing the suspension and the flip, and then they had maybe one plate with one car in the background going, you know, at speed. And the direction was, okay, now put it all together, make it look like Hellboy is actually hitting the car, flipping, add particles and dust and debris and stuff coming off the car, and then make it look like the street's populated as if like everyone else is going about their own business, you know, and Hellboy's just kind of in the middle of this. There was, I think, a series of 6 shots that had, like, it was a continuous series, so like he would punch and then it would cut from his point of view and then underneath and then over and then around, and it was just a really good looking shot. I mean, it for a practical Jeep flipping thing, they did a great job out there.
Cut! Cut! Very good.
Special effects kind of cover such a wide field of things, but on this movie, everything gets physical. Anything that's physical on the effects, whether it be anything mechanical, any explosive stuff, any of that, it's all down to special effects. And the difference is you've got the visual side of it, which is the computer side, but then anything after the computer, that's down to us. In the library, they were these glass cabinets, display cabinets, and then a big plate glass window at the end. And I built a track and a rig that the guy sat in, the actor could sit in. The camera was attached to it, and we just fired him down, and it did it in 3 seconds and smashed through everything. It was an original, interesting shot because, again, it would have been probably done it in CG in another area, but we did it for real, and I think we achieved something that was something totally a different look.
We introduce this and you're already pointing.
Okay.
All right. All right, guys. Action!
Listen, Sammy, I'm not a very good shot, but the Samaritan here uses really big bullets, so... What do you say we work this out? Nice, peaceful... Oh, crap.
The moment I decided to make Hellboy into a movie, I went to Ron. I called Ron and I said, hey, I'm writing a movie for you. Ron is Hellboy.
We both immediately knew that Ron Perlman should play the character. Ron's got Hellboy's demeanor. He's got that working stiff, been there, done that quality in almost everything he does.
Well, I can't think of anybody else who could play it, quite honestly. I thought it looked rather like Ron Perlman. But Red.
He's born to play this because I don't think anyone could get so much across with all these prosthetics and all this going on as he can. And it's weird, I forget about the suit.
I wish I could do something about this.
He loves what he does, and he's always either singing or having a laugh, or, you know, so it makes everybody's job a lot easier. And he's extraordinary in this, and he's worked his socks off, and it's great working with him. We have such a laugh.
Everybody, focus.
Ron's been great. I just love Ron to bits, and he seems to take to the role very naturally. He does indeed.
Are you laughing because he's getting it wrong, or is he good?
No, he's so good.
Even though his outer trappings are very abstract and very sort of weird and complex. You know, he's red, he's from hell, he's got horns, you know, who he is as a human being and how he manifests all of these, you know, contradictions was very accessible and required as little preparation from my point of view as an actor as anything I've ever done. He sounded like me, he walked like me, he talked like me, and all I had to basically do was, you know, sit around for 4 hours while they put the makeup and the costume on, and then wait for somebody to say action.
Say we work this out in a nice, peaceful... Oh, crap.
A lot of Hellboy is in Ron. I mean, he still has that same. He's got a pretty good sense of humor to him. He's pretty. I don't know how to say he's scruff with people or anything like that, but it's a lot of the characteristics that Hellboy has are unique to Ron as well. He's just covered up in the makeup right now, and it's him coming through. It's really not. I hesitate to say it's not a real acting stretch for him. Ron's one of the best guys to sit in the chair I've ever dealt with. He knows he's been through this sort of makeup a number of times in the past, and he knows what he's in for.
Well, the makeup is 4 hours. The guys I'm working with are, you know, really cool, wonderful, fun guys to be around. Jake Garber is my makeup artist. He just does Hellboy. He's assisted by Matt Rose, who is, you know, this genius who is here in a kind of a workman-like capacity, but he's the guy who originally did this sculpture, which became the Hellboy makeup, which was the combination of Mignola's vision and my face.
Guillermo liked the idea or the feeling of that original sculpture. To try and match that but make it a practical makeup was tricky because it's not a practical makeup at all. It's kind of challenging. He's got his horns right by the end of his brow, and I didn't think it was going to give him any movement. He could move it pretty well. But the biggest challenge was satisfying Guillermo, making sure we got that to look right. And he was on top of every bit of it. And I'm glad he was, because if anytime I backed off too much to be safe, he'd say, no, let's get that going, get that right. It's not an easy makeup. It's very, very hard. And for Jake to apply it, Jake and Bart, who applies the double, it's not an easy one to do. He's got to line everything up just right. If it's off, it shows. And if it's off, Guillermo will see it, or Ron will see it, and he points it out. So it's tricky. Yeah, so he has his standard makeup, which is from the chest up. That takes about 3.5, 4 hours.
Usual day, Ron will show up, and usually there's some preparation done on his skin because we have to really take great pains to that, because as many times as he's going to be in the makeup, it's very easy for his skin to get breakouts or just have problems just in general. The first piece that goes on is the neck, and that's glued down below his jawline, down to about his collarbone.
I hope I come out of it this time. Last time I blacked out, that was pretty good. Seizures. They usually pause when it gets to about here for about a minute. They take a coffee break.
And the piece extends down to his pectorals right there, which we leave that loose because that'll lift up, and then there's a fabric suit that goes on underneath it, a muscle suit that goes on. The next piece that goes on is the skull cap, the plastic skull cap that goes over and basically keeps his hair formed down there. And then a foam latex piece goes on top of that with the horns incorporated in it. Once that is put on, Guillermo refers to that as his Teletubby look, because he's now pretty much just got a hood on him and it's just his face showing through. At that point then, we usually have a break in the morning. We have a cup of coffee or just stretch for a little bit. The next part of the process, Ron has a full face appliance that goes on right there, and we leave the lip off of it till the very end, because that's the part that seems to get the most damage. It just seems to be common for most makeups. Once the face is on, I'll do all the painting on that, get the colors right, and it's weird because most people are going to look at it and think it's just red, but there's actually probably about 4 or 5 colors in there to kind of help break it up, plus the shading that goes on as well. Once the painting is all done, then we start doing the wig work right there, which is basically it's like a samurai wig that goes on him. the 2 mutton chops left. And at that point then we'll usually have a break where Ron can go out and grab some breakfast, stretch again for that point. And then probably about 15 to 20 minutes before he needs to go to wardrobe, then we'll do the lower lip and the goatee at that point.
From old Jew to young superhero.
Because I think Ron's not afraid of moving with it. Some actors, when they put it on, they feel the contact of makeup on their face and they just react to think that they can't move, but you can move just fine. And he's not afraid of wearing any makeup.
They apply all the stuff to your face, which is without life. And the minute it's on you, it has a life. It was unbelievable that there was no adjusting required. I mean, all I had to do was just be in the moment and think about what I was supposed to be thinking about. And the makeup just mirrored it. And in the most subtle and lifelike way.
Way too late. Yeah, too late. As soon as the camera clears, he's got to be okay. As soon as he clears. Stand by. Ronnie, you good? Yeah. Okay. Here we go. We are rolling. Camera. Camera, spin.
It has to be directed to his glove, to his face, and upper body.
Basically, there's a bunch of features on this thing. The lights up, and the lights are on dimmer, so I can control the glowing effect. And it's all going over a tube that we can bolt all of our stuff onto. So we can basically bolt whatever onto any part.
The concept of the mecha glove comes from Seed of Destruction, where Rasputin is opening this portal. In the graphic novel, you'll see Grigori wearing 2 gloves, and that got pared down. Guillermo thought maybe the 1 glove would be even better because then it's sort of it's a reflection of Hellboy in some way. The conceptual phase of the glove was done by Ty Rubin Ellingson. He drew a really cool, image of just the glove. Everything that you see on the glove is on that drawing.
Having glass blown for all the fingertips and the stuff like that. In fact, Mike, I want to give this to you, we should paint it, to draw on the runes and what have you. And then we'll go in and we'll actually relief that into it.
And Mark Satrakian and his team, along with our fabricating people, they just put loving detail into this thing. It's got so many points of motion.
This whole thing, you want this thing to pop up, rotate around, and cinch back down.
I love it. As long as it moves. If it bumps out, I'm in favor of it.
Okay, would it be okay if it flipped up like that and revealed the inside and maybe turned around this way and went back down? Like a Ferris wheel.
If the inside were like copper. If anything moves, I'm happy.
Okay, we'll just make it.
I'm a simple
We'll make lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
plate that they had shot, the action of the scientist in the beginning of the shot was perfect. It's exactly what Guillermo wanted, and you know, we really liked it. The problem happens about halfway through the shot. The trajectory of the scientist, since he's on a wire, starts to sort of go off, and he gets lifted up a little too high, and you know, he doesn't really act like he's hitting this thing when he hits it. So what we had to do is we had to, about halfway through the shot, take over from the real scientist to a completely digital scientist. Essentially, our creature department that's headed up by Rudy Grossman, and also our animation department, which work very closely together, and Mauricio Bayaki heads that up. They work very closely together and build a digital model of this scientist that's based off of 3D scan data, or you know, pictures that were shot on set, or whatever reference they can get their hands on.
We were presented with the challenge of having to replace him with the digital double. But the most challenging aspect of it was that he was wearing this the scientist jacket, which was kind of in full motion as he's spinning. So as he gets into position and his cloth is ripped up, we had to have our digital double go in there with his jacket already simmed into place, match that frame as close as possible, and then continue with that same cloth simulation motion. And the cloth sim artist working on it just did a fantastic job of just getting that frame to match up and then continue. So when that match happens, you don't see any switch from the real cloth to the digital cloth.
If you look at the original shot, the original cut, we have the scientist that tumbles into frame and lands on this blue goo. And you know, when I first came on the show, they're like, "Oh yeah, he just hits it and disappears," and it was 26 frames or something. I'm like, "All right, sure, you know, we'll just do a little," and he's gone. And then, you know, as soon as we started really working on that, Guillermo looked at it and said, "Oh, let's do a close-up," and we're all, "Oh." So we went and we did, the first pass was just straight animation, where we animated the hero creature, which was the scientist, and we also had secondary animation of the skeleton, and then we comped them together and did sort of a rough pass, and you know, showed it to Guillermo and said, "He'll hit it here, he'll sort of burn up his arms, he'll burn from the back, his head will disappear," and you know, Guillermo would love it and say, "I love everything, but you don't have the screaming skull in there." He basically wanted that action going on, and you know, we gave it to him.
From that point on, it gets handed off to the technical directing team, which texture and light and sort of add the sort of lifelike surfaces and feel to everything. So from that point on, the technical directing team will hand renders 3D images of all these little individual elements of the shot to a compositing team, and the compositor's job is to take all these elements, many layers. There were probably 100 in the CG, in the scientist dematerializing shot, and they'll take that and they'll layer it all together in the right order, treat everything with their special magic, and out the other end comes the final shot.
Step it on roof, man.
I wanted to start off with an interesting shape to start with. I think the key is to have an interesting shape, because once you have that interesting shape, it becomes exciting to dress it and fill it with. So the three key elements was the water tank, Abe's tank, a fireplace, and big doors. And from that, I sort of played around with a bit of paper and eventually came up with the configuration that we eventually built.
Hello?
The sets are extraordinary. They've worked so hard at getting what Guillermo really has visualized, and Mike. because, you know, as a creator, those two have worked together. And, you know, even kind of every single set, you know, the BPRD and all its tunnels, the, you know, Dr. Broom's library, it was amazing. I never realized how extraordinary these things were going to be.
The whole of the BPRD interior was built on the stage. In the very early days, Guillermo and I discussed this, and we felt that something which had a sort of concrete nature to it, as though it was something built in the 1940s, would be a good route to take. And there's lots of interest in shuttered concrete. It's got a strength and a power and a feeling of stability, which I hope is reflected in the designs. There were snippets from the comic books, which we thought, well, that's great, let's take that idea and work that into the picture. We've used a lot of the images from the books, a certain amount of Mike Mignola's character work in the background, sculpture work, that sort of thing, we've incorporated into some of the sets.
If I didn't design them, it looked like I could have designed them. Most of the sets I had nothing to do with feel very much like something I had something to do with. It was just like somebody read my mind.
We've tried very hard to be true to the colours of the book as well, with the browns and the blacks and the more blacks and the greys and so forth. It's so that Hellboy will pop out more, of course.
Rasputin's mausoleum.
I see the puppet. Where is the puppeteer? Cut!
Okay. So as soon as he says, I don't know why you chose me, sir, you start looking at them.
Okay, well, just, you know, it's kind of hard for me to hear because the buzz feels, so
Yeah.
I'll give it a go. Okay.
All right. But you look fantastic. The Johnny Wayne Miller of trash. Johnny Wayne Miller of trash.
Cut!
Doug was perfect. I mean, he was tall and lean and slender. More than slender, he was actually just skinny. He was a very, very thin person, which is great when you're building muscles onto something. You know, if you have a normal-sized person, you start sculpting muscles on top of that, they start to look really bulky and weird, you know. But with a guy like Doug, who's almost like a human armature, you know, for a sculptor, it was perfect. You know, we built the muscles on top of him. Steve Wang did all of the sculptural work on Abe, and it just really panned out to look exactly like the maquette.
I feel like I'm waiting for my bride.
I present to you, drum roll please. Hey, thank you.
Oh my God, I am. Hello, Bebe. Bravo!
When Doug would come in the morning, Tom Flouts, Simon Weber, and Nigel Booth would get him ready. And then depending on whether we were shooting him with or without wardrobe, if we were doing a day where he was bare-chested, the first thing that would go on would be it was kind of like a shirt, like a tank top shaped appliance that went over his body. and that got all glued down and put in place. The second thing that would go on would be the headpiece. The head essentially encased Doug's entire head in a one piece of appliance, and it would glue along the chin line and around the back of the neck and around the lips, and then shoulder pieces that also included arms that came down to about the elbow. The next thing that we put on would be the neck pieces. There's a front neck piece, a back neck piece, and the mechanical gills that all go as part of the neck assembly. And then it would take them roughly, you know, from the point that they started until the point that they were finished, it was about a 4-hour process. So 2 hours into it, all the appliances were on. And then another 2 hours were consumed by actually airbrushing colors onto Doug's skin. And then on top of all of that stuff, they glued clear fins down his back, on the backs of his arms, on the backs of his legs.
Worn latex and a cheap hooker. Okay. They give me this beautiful body, right? It's a, yeah. You don't need to go to the gym anymore. You just need some glue, some rubber, and 3 friends, and you got this great physique. So, yeah, that, and then the parts of me that actually are showing my skin, they spray with this body paint, and then they have to do the striping and this. I don't know. They're amazing artists, and it just takes a while. The thing that helps it go by is that I love the guys putting the makeup on me. We get along great. We joke around a lot. So, because you're in there for 5-6 hours, depending on how much they're showing that day. So you have to be able to get along with everybody.
Always go. You don't have to be crazy to work it, but it helps.
Guillermo wanted Abe to hold his arm up and for his finger to, his pinky and his thumb to hyperextend beyond the point of a human's anatomy. When Abe is performing his empathic powers, we both arrived at the solution to just make an insert hand, a fake hand. And that worked out really well because it was used very smartly in the film. There are a couple of moments when you see Abe's hand come up, the thing hyperextends, and then they cut back to another shot of him where he's already doing the thing that he was leading up to doing. So you miss it almost, you know, you don't really notice that something weird has just happened, although your mind retains that. It's like, that didn't look quite right, and yet there he is, you know, so it was very cleverly employed.
There, a cistern on the other side.
In addition, we also incorporated gills that moved, and Mark used the same sort of technology that he used with the Samael tentacles with a card that tells the servos to move sequentially. And so when he would breathe, you could see, you know, this undulating motion in his gills that really gave the character a lot of life.
But you will help him, in essence, to come.
Cut, very good.
It's an action film. I'll explain this to you. But first, we take this.
First, we did the life and love of Counting Floss, and I played Pepe. I was very good in that. Jeffrey Tambor, what was the question?
What do you think of the Ron Perlman?
Oh, Ron Perlman, I've seen all of his movies. He is buenísimo. He is un hombre de piedra, which means to be pistol all the time, all the time.
This is so much not a discovery that this could play without dust. You know, because it's not we're not underlining. This could play separate. I get you. Sí, pero si cuando él saque esto están ahí, empuja.
Muy bien.
Hey, so this right here. This goes in, that goes out.
Blood in his veins right up years ago.
Adios. Sí que está en la mano.
Lo que quería Guillermo es como un cirujano que se ha autooperado muchas veces y tiene todo el cuerpo lleno de cicatrices y tanto puede tener esta parte del cuerpo pues, puesta más abajo. Era como una especie de muñeco de trapo súper cosido por todas partes. La única idea que Guillermo nos dijo muy clara del personaje es que el personaje se había cortado los párpados y se había cortado los labios.
Sabiendo que tenían que ser cicatrices y que el personaje lo que hace es cortarse la piel y recosérsela y tal, empezamos a pensar, bueno, pues le pondré una cicatriz en el brazo. Luego, por ejemplo, según los diseños también que nos hizo una chica que se llama Georgina y otro artista, Sergio Sandoval. Entonces, a partir de ahí ellos empezaron a pensar cómo se podían distribuir esas cicatrices y nos dieron unos dibujos y a partir de ahí pues nosotros cogimos una idea de aquí, otra de otro dibujo, se lo enseñamos a Guillermo y Guillermo pues nos dijo, me gusta esta cicatriz, me gusta cómo queda esto y a partir de ahí empezamos la escultura.
Yo me dediqué más a lo que era la cabeza de Cronen porque partíamos de una cabeza de Laia Beran, el actor que interpretaba a Cronen. Sacamos un cast de esa cabeza en plastilina y sobre esa cabeza no añadimos material, sino que empezamos a sacar material para dejarlo como más esquelético, de alguna manera. Porque en principio la idea era que la cabeza que íbamos a ver en algunos planos cortos sería un animatronic, sería una cabeza aparte, y para el actor, para los planos generales que veíamos a Cronen desnudo en la sala de autopsias, usaríamos un muñeco y después usaríamos a Laia maquillado con todas las prótesis. Al actor era mucho más difícil hacerle ese tipo de efectos, ya que no podemos jugar con sus ojos, ya que sus ojos están ahí, no puedes quitarle la parte de los párpados. Tenemos que poner unos ojos falsos y después añadir prótesis encima. Y lo mismo pasa con los dientes. Tenemos que añadir unos dientes y después añadir como los labios cortados encima. De manera que el maquillaje ganaba como más volumen y la escultura lo perdía.
Creo que eso lo inventó Guillermo. Aprovecha la secuencia de comienzo de la película donde Cronen sufre una explosión y se le vuela la mano y cogí eso como excusa para poder construir una mano mecánica. Cosa que identifica mucho a Cronen son todos los mecanismos, los engranajes pequeños y todo este tipo de maquinaria y él quería que la tecnología usada en la mano fuera parecida a todos esos ingenios mecánicos que crea él. O sea, todo está basado en engranajes y cositas así de relojería. Aquí hay un pequeño servomotor que está retocado para que no deje de girar. En lugar de tener un tope, lo que hace es girar infinitamente hacia los lados, en una dirección o en otra y a diferentes velocidades, y controlaba estos pequeños engranajes que sacamos de un montón de relojes que tuvimos que desmontar. A partir del dibujo de los diseños que hizo Sandoval, los de efectos, los de mecanismos, los que nos hacen los mecanismos normalmente, diseñaron parte de la mano en ordenador, los dedos, y de allí sacaron unas piezas que cortaron en acero inoxidable con láser. Y mientras ellos montaban su parte de mecanismos, me dieron una réplica, una versión un poco rudimentaria de lo que serían los mecanismos luego, para que yo pudiera empezar a modelar lo que sería la carcasa. Así era un trabajo paralelo. Ellos iban construyendo los mecanismos y yo iba construyendo lo que sería la parte exterior. En principio, Adolfo y Enric diseñaron un sistema para mover la mano que se basaba en unos potenciómetros que iban conectados a unos circuitos integrados y así podíamos mover los dedos sin necesidad de conectarlo a un radiocontrol. Casi unos días antes de rodarlo, Mark Setraken se le ocurrió introducir un pequeño cambio en el sistema de movimiento de la mano y consiguió conectar su ordenador personal a una emisora de radio que podía controlar él con una tableta gráfica podía controlar la mano con mucha más sencillez y un poco más fluido. De manera que el movimiento de la mano era más orgánico, era más fluido, más suave.
Aparte de sacarle el molde de la cabeza para hacer las prótesis, luego las utilizamos también utilizamos la cabeza para hacer la máscara. Ahí modelamos la máscara en plastilina, entonces se le hace un molde a la máscara y de ahí ya sacas la copia, en este caso de resina.
Cuando nos pidió que teníamos que hacer las máscaras, escogimos me parece como 4 modelos de máscara diferentes. Está el el que más se parece en el cómic, que es el de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, más la Manchester Library. Y después tenemos, por ejemplo, la máscara veneciana, que era un concepto muy extraño, porque Guillermo quería algo más humanizado en la máscara, que diera como una sensación más enferma al personaje. El modelo de máscara veneciana nos llevó bastantes cambios. Al final, realmente para esa máscara acabamos utilizando dos exprimidores de limón y 2 aparatitos que se llevan la humedad del aire y tienen como agujeritos y está como muy trabajado. Entonces con esas piezas acabamos haciendo un respiradero que fue lo que realmente después a Guillermo le gustó. Entonces fue como búsqueda aquí, búsqueda allá y un poco también como la idea de Cronen, se supone hace sus máscaras, sus relojes, sus mecanismos, pues un poco el mismo funcionamiento, pues vamos a coger de aquí y de allá, vamos a montarlo todo y a ver qué queda, y lo que quedó realmente es lo que se ve en la película.
No, you first. I see the puppet. Right.
He's a good-looking chap on that.
I am really sorry.
How are you?
Fine.
Oh,
I killed you, oh? Huh?
Ah! Look at this. Jesuit school.
He's got some sort of a cop. He's gone now.
Laddie, you better get the makeup.
Yeah, I am pretty.
In. Out. Now move. Bam! That's it. So we do that. He breathes in and out twice, and then gets off. Hey, Mark. And action! Breathe. And up. Christopher Lloyd is back. Well.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, Todd. Camera's ready. Yes.
His stone hand, yeah, that's a fully mechanical, articulated hand. He also has these bashing hands. It's like just a solid version of that and stunt versions of things. But his stone hand is it's like almost another character because it has to work with him. You can't. It's almost like Ron has to operate it. He only can work the wrist inside.
but the hand itself is puppeteered by Chad Waters.
In the dexterous hand, mechanical hand, Ron controls all the wrist action. It's like it's on a gimbal, so he basically, when he grabs onto a bar, when he rotates his own fist, the dexterous hand should emulate that. And then I control just the fingers, finger and thumb. The hand has like probably 4 different programs, because I only have like 2 sticks to control, so one stick does like the index and the thumb, the other stick will do, the pinky and middle. We have lightweight versions, so that you can really hit something and not, damage it too badly. We have posable versions, you can just kind of bend it, so it's not just so you're not committed to a fist for shots where we can't use our dexterous hands, which are pretty fragile. There are times when Guillermo wants a shot, where, we're going to be jeopardizing the mechanical hand. There's a scene where Hellboy fries Samuel on the 3rd rail, and he's got to reach out with the stone hand and actually grab it. And, because Ron had to really throw his arm out there, he couldn't really, control how much weight he put on the fingers. So every take, we broke a finger. But Ron always gives it that little extra something when he does something with the wrist. Just he puts these touches on it that really make a difference.
It's tough for Chad because he's got to act like he's not doing anything, because it's got to be part of Ron. It can't look like it's, just something doing something like that when he's talking. So it's tricky, but Chad makes it look good. Ron's really happy with it.
Ready, action, Kev! Hold on, Brian. Okay. I'll give you the action to the water. Action, Brian! Look at the hole in the water. Good. Excellent. All right. Right on, let's prepare for take.
¿Quieres que hagamos un poquito de corte cuando estamos aquí?
Sí, sí, sí. More steam by far.
You doing last looks here, Mikey? Yes, we are, sir.
Steve Wang was in charge of this project, and he has made, I can't even count how many creature suits in his career. He had a lot of input as to how the understructure of the suit was built, and by understructure I mean there's a lot of sort of support elements that live underneath the suit that we can actually cinch onto Brian so that the suit is held up. One of the tricks that Steve uses is to shave down the core, the body core, so that when he puts the suit on, it fits really tightly. And when he moves, the suit moves with him. And when he breathes, you can see the breathing happening in the abdomen area. And then once the sculpture was completed, actually the sculpture was a really complicated process because there were so many elements that sort of were done separately and then brought back together onto the suit. For instance, the shoulders, the arms, all of the tentacles, the head, everything. Everything had to be sort of done in pieces and then molded separately and then put back together as a suit onto the understructure that was designed. And then, of course, we had to include places to put batteries, extra motors, that kind of stuff. And then it went to a painting process once the skins were run, the foam skins. And Samael had a lot of complex features that Guillermo wanted to incorporate in the final version. The eyes were a big challenge for us. Guillermo wanted to have a lot of features going on in a very limited amount of space and with a limited amount of time. And he told us to take a look at McKenna's Gold, an old Western film. And at the beginning of the film, there's a really beautiful close-up shot of a vulture blinking. And you can really see this membrane just sweeping over this bird's eye. And we use that as reference for Samael's eye. We also had to incorporate a membrane that sort of sealed over the eye and then pulled back to reveal the eye. In addition to that, the eyeball itself had to move in and out of the head while it was looking around and while this membrane was pulling back. The other thing was the tendrils on the back of his skull, which kind of looked like hair. Mark Satrakian designed a very unique tentacle mechanism. Inside of each tentacle is a series of servos. And so all of the movement is contained within the length of the tentacle without anything external, which is great. That really solved a big problem for us. The other problem that was presented with this kind of design was the fact that you have to sort of control the servos sequentially, because if they all move at the same time, the tentacle will just kind of curl up and in one direction or another and not really look very interesting at all. So what Mark did is he designed a circuit board that actually told the servos to move in sequence when he sent the signal through his radio control. So they had a very eerie, undulating movement. And when you see, 15 of these things all looped up with slime and all moving apparently individually, it's pretty interesting. It looks like somebody had an array of eels hanging off the back of his head. They're all writhing around at the same time. We even had people asking us during dailies how they had time to put the CG tentacles in. And obviously they weren't CG, they were the real things. So that was a very proud moment for us.
Cut. Roger.
And action.
Okay. There we go. Got it, Sammy, up.
Action, guys.
The idea when we originally talked about it in pre-production with Guillermo and Blair Tippett and myself was that Abe, the whole time underwater, would be digital. Even though it was dry for wet, the environment, meaning that the room would be shot in dry, and then we'd add elements and particulate matter and bubbles and so forth to make it look like it's underwater. And he was supposed to be the whole time just a digital Abe swimming around.
What happens is the modelers, they build the outer shell, the things you actually see in the film, the rendered surfaces. They hand that off to the character setup people, and then we take that and build the skeletal structure, build in all the muscle volume structures based off of whatever the model is. So the model will have some creases and some folds based off of human anatomy and realistic type surfaces, and we just fill in the rest.
So once the puppet's built, then we kind of put muscles on top. The muscles follow the joints in the puppet, and we can also lay muscles on top of other muscles to actually kind of get a faux collision detection, so that the muscles actually ride on top of each other. And then once we actually have the muscles kind of built, like Abe Sapien was pretty close to a real physical human model as far as muscles go. Then we basically put that into the skin puppet, and then connect between the skin points and the muscle points, and that's kind of acts as a spring force to actually control and deform the skin surface based on the movement of the muscles.
I have to hand it to Paul for doing this muscle system, because Abe Sapien was the test case in a ways for the muscle system, because he's basically a naked dude. So you can really see the articulation of all the muscles.
Abe, I was most worried about, like when we were first talking about the project. Swimming is really hard to pull off. It's, because anytime you move in water, like all of your other body is moving and counter-reacting to that. So I was really worried that we wouldn't be able to pull those shots off.
The first thing that came to my mind was Creature from the Black Lagoon, because that, as a kid, I just loved that, and, would always try and emulate that, in swimming pools, and it was different enough, and it was just, it was really cool. It was just a neat swimming stroke that, you know, wasn't like a normal stroke. And so I was talking to Todd and telling him that if there's anything he can come up with, that it doesn't have to be necessarily the creature from the Black Lagoon stroke, but if there's anything like that that he can come up with that can be a signature.
We checked out a bunch of these different movies and tried to combine a lot of it, and then also would look at what Doug Jones was doing, because he has a very specific movement signature too. Like, he has these really quick little movements. So we ended up doing kind of a hybrid of stuff. Like, we kept his legs, like Abe's legs, together, so it was this kind of like a porpoise action. Like, it wasn't a lot of like human scissor kick action. It was like these kind of gentle moves. It was a lot about bringing a lot of energy from the shoulders and from the arms, so that he'd always have these graceful circular motions. It's all about like keeping the arcs rolling so that he'd look really pretty.
He had kind of almost like a quirkiness, you know, when he's out of the water. So I was always kind of trying to play it like he's much more comfortable in his home environment and more graceful. Not, you know, he's very graceful on land, but just more fluid, you know, in the water. But to keep the same characteristics, we went back in and added a few little head, you know, mainly with his head and his hands, and copied the gestures that Doug had developed.
Guillermo was pretty adamant that he's got to feel really comfortable in the water. Like, it's no big deal, you know. It's like when he dives into the water and he's looking around, you know, it's sort of like he's aware, because he knows there's probably Samuel down here and it's going to be messy, but at the same time he's really comfortable in his environment, so it had to be kind of casual. And I think it works out pretty well. Like, Abe looks really sweet, and it's great because he's like, you know, for a lot of the fans of the comic, he's one of the favorite characters, so it's cool to be able to do him justice, you know.
Camera ready?
Camera ready.
Fuji ready? Always.
All ready.
Okay, here we go. Set and roll.
Speed.
That's it, guys.
So you won?
No more friends. Doc has finished the movie.
Oh.
Bravo. Bravo. A little champagne for the fish.
Am I sharing this with anybody? No. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yell it out, please. You have to stop all the work now, please.
Going over here. Say action. You're gonna turn. Parker gonna be going. You're gonna go like this. See?
Just coming up with the right coat for Hellboy, for example, was really quite a challenge. You know, do you make it out of fabric? Do you make it out of leather? One of the interesting things I find about comic books is that from illustration to illustration, it's never quite the same image. Like, it's about the action and what the character's doing. So if the character's standing there talking, then it looks like an ordinary coat. if he's jumping off a building, well, it's flying, out, or, he's been through some amazing fight and it's been ripped and torn. And to try and bring all of those elements together to make a garment for a movie that you shoot in continuity. So we had this amazing source material, image-wise, to start with. It wasn't like starting sort of from ground zero and then building up a look. It was taking this amazing artwork that Mike Mignola had done and getting this team to come together to bring it to life. And that was, I found, really interesting dilemma, because to literally be taking a two-dimensional art form and making it three-dimensional from all aspects, working together was really a challenge. Most of the principal wardrobe was designed and constructed. There's a little bit of shopping that was done, because it is a contemporary movie, so there was a little bit, where there are suits, with the exception of John Hurt's clothing. That was all made. That was all handmade, with a little tailor that made those, so they had a real sort of old man feeling to them. We could probably have gone and bought them, but it was better to find the right textile and just give him a little different feeling. And Liz is really quite eclectic and bohemian, so again, about half of her clothes have been made and about half of them we bought, so we have one or two delightful pieces from Armani and Prada, and then added those with kind of street-wise bits and pieces, and where I couldn't find things that blended really well, then we would just go ahead and make them. And then in some instances I'd find something that I really, really liked, because Selma Blair is very petite, so you'd find something that really worked on her, but you couldn't get the multiples, and we needed to have 6 or 8 or whatever it was. So then we would basically make what worked look great on her. Cronen's wardrobe is really fun. Ladislav and I were talking today, saying, he really is the full fashion ramp of S&M wardrobe. I mean, he's in these amazing, it's kind of a stretch rubber, fleece-backed rubber suits, and they're kind of second skin, and they're form-fitting, but they're mixed with quite interesting scabbards for his weapons, and the masks that he has. The masks are quite scary in their own way. Across the hall is the prosthetics department. So, because we work so closely with one another, with the costumes having to work around the prosthetics that they're doing, and Cinovation with their makeup have done an absolutely phenomenal job. And then for us to augment with the costumes that would go on and sort of finish that off, to bring Mike's amazing imagination into fruition has been really, really, really exciting.
Here we go. On the mark. Quiet, please. You set? You are. And roll.
Face feet. Hold your arm there, Brian. Hold it up. Okay.
Come on, do Maniac for us.
Okay, guys, here we go.
Come here, and we do the falling off the gun. This time from here with a crane. That when he gets swiped, goes like this. Down. And another one here. He gets swiped and then moves sideways, catch and fall.
turning off, Todd? Esta es la última, creo. Y ahora vamos a ver si la primera. Grab his leg, Ryan.
Some of the fight scenes we did with Samuel in, for instance, the subway platform fight, we had to put together a fight scene with a guy in a suit who can't hear, for the most part, who can't see, for the most part, and has 2.5-foot extensions off the end of each arm. And we had to put together a fight scene between him and Ron Perlman, who's Hellboy, and we had to not knock Ron unconscious. And these two literally fight from one end to the other. They're tearing up columns, there's offices collapsing, there's flying, there's lights being torn out, just a complete melee. And so far we've been discussing how Samuel and Hellboy will be fighting and all the details, but pretty soon we need to start talking about the 250 extras that we're going to load into this place and how we're going to shoot in and amongst this huge crowd, put in an entire film crew, do these huge stunts all in this space. I mean, it's pretty intensive, you know, detailed planning and stuff we've got to get done. We had meetings months before we started shooting with the art department. We had to make changes to the sets so that we could get our flying systems in, our ratchet systems in. We had to have ceiling pieces moved or rearranged or redesigned. We had to take out sections of the floor to make some of these things work. We obviously worked hand in hand with the visual effects department. It was just a huge undertaking.
I'm going to lock this thing up in a minute. We won't be able to.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Okay, here we go. Stand by to roll, please.
Michael, do we have a cell phone number to call John here? Morning, John. We need you back.
Just for one quick little pop.
And a little pop. We gotta just get that part out.
Guys.
Can we go? I have to be in Prague 4. Do you have to do that?
Yeah, it does sound like Jeffrey Zero, right? Okay. Yeah, Yarda?
I have a lot to do today.
Here we go. Set. Quiet.
Hey. Do I have to put it up in frame?
Yeah.
It doesn't match.
Oh my God!
There's nothing I have. Neither, this doesn't match either.
Move a little more to your right, Yada.
I'm off. I'm sorry. It's me. It's not yada yada. Is this? What do you want to do? Do you want me to put it up in frame?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and the way Patrick said, if you wanted electricity, you should pay for it.
You wanted a what?
Electricity. The lights were expensive enough. We hope that you complete it.
You have to chip in?
I'm going to tell you how old I am. I remember my grandpa used to play. It wasn't this.
I believe that the cinematography, the images have to be at the service of the story. I don't bring a particular aesthetic to the plate that is divorced to the story. So in that sense, yeah, each time we're doing a shot that I feel that is in that direction, that it's embracing that,
is where I get it's the benefit of what I do and the hours I spend doing it. The moment comes where you see that the dailies are impeccable and they're really telling that your effort is there, that the effort of 100 people around you are there.
Beyond Guillermo Navarro being such a fantastic presence on the set and extremely capable, he's a brilliant artist, and I love the seriousness in which he's shooting this film. There's no condescension towards it being a comic book. He might as well be shooting The Godfather. You know, it's given that kind of epic stature and that kind of gravitas and beauty.
Well, the statement is the look of the comic, and it has to do also with the production design and the color of the sets. The majority of the shots of Hellboy are either at night or in sets that are built. So it's really, it's 90% of the show it's a lit environment. And we've had the use of techno cranes and hot heads, and pretty standard for this kind of movie. It's a mix between an action movie and a very emotional movie, so it has different needs of how the camera describes or moves.
You killed my father. Your ass is mine.
We have a very special small crane that I love, that I discovered when I did another movie with Del Toro in Spain, when we did The Devil's Backbone together. And we brought it from Spain, because we found that with that little crane we could accomplish things that we haven't before been able to. So that's the other ingredient of our preferred toy.
Look toward your right.
Why are the guys rehearsing?
Can I have a gun? Anybody? Anybody got a gun on? Can I have a gun?
Action!
Hey. One, two.
This rock will be thrown by Hellboy stunt coordinator Monty Simmons. The timing and the placement of its landing in the water is critical. They've brought me in from Los Angeles, California, flown me 6,000 miles first class to throw this rock, and I'm going to show you a rehearsal, very seldom seen by the audience. You know, they only see what happens on the screen. This is what goes on behind the scenes on Hellboy in Prague, The movie. the year 2003. All right. You watching? You ready? All right, hold on. Let's get the right angle here. All right, we're rolling. And at this point, Guillermo would yell action, and this is what you'd see. Wow. Let me just zoom in on that ripple. Are you proud of the work that you've done here, Martin? I've worked many years, 22 years in this industry to get to this point. To throw rocks? They trust me with two buckets of rock. And you'll notice these rocks are of the larger size. Right. You know, I've graduated up. When I first got into business, they only let me have rocks like this, gravel. See, I mean, look at the size of this rock. Wow. Not anybody can do this. It's pretty dangerous. I mean, it's pretty impressive if you ask me. Well, thank you, Monty Simmons, for showing us. I'm glad you could be a part of this. I mean, again, you're seeing something that not a lot of people in this world get to see. It's a special thing you guys get to see.
Painting these sort of sets is absolutely crucial to getting it to feel right, and it is like the third layer, if you like, on the sets. You've drawn them up, you've had them built, you've had them constructed, but now it's this layer of paint which has to go on, and yet another layer of paint, and yet another layer, giving it a lot of depth and character. We're filling it with water about a foot deep, and it's going to be very murky, and we've generated these large clusters of eggs for sort of Samiel eggs, and which are lit from below, so they just glow in this dark light. There's a large fight sequence in there, which is mostly all computer worked at the end of the picture. So we're providing a space, if you like, and special effects will blast the water and other types of effects in there. I mean, the majority of sets have large special effects requirements to them, and be they mechanical or hydraulic or whatever, we have to obviously incorporate those into the building of the sets, and also sometimes the design of the sets, so that they do work from a visual point of view as well as a practical point of view. We're sitting in one right now, which is a set consisting of large would-be metal doors which spring up out of the ground with flaps that pop down and prevent people climbing over it. It's an important sequence in the story where the team gets split up into two groups of two, and this door appears. It's too big for us to make as a special effects door coming out of the ground. That's computer added later, but the door itself, when it's up in its up position and the flaps drop down, that's all special effects. And it's wonderful that we have CGI work and computers now, because they can even stretch it even further. We can make sets that go so far, but it's the computers and the guys in their rooms back in America or London, wherever, that can really stretch it even further.
Hey, Mark! Action!
We had a number of challenges with that sequence. You know, you had 6 Sams jumping on Hellboy, and sometimes in one of the big fight shots, it's a practical Hellboy miming a fight that we actually, you know, changed the speed of the way the plate was played back a little bit to get it a little bit more dynamic, and then you cut directly from that to, you know, a completely CG Hellboy fighting 7 CG Sams all at once. Plus, we had the additional challenge of having the practical suit Samael, which is beautiful, in the shot, and we had to match that. Not only just cut, you know, a lot of our sequences there was like one Sam, and so it would be, you know, cutting from practical Sam to CG Sam and then back to practical Sam, which is a challenge of itself. But you had like 2 practical Sams in the shot, and then 3 CG Sams sharing the same screen space, and they all had to look like the exact same reality, the same physical presence. And when you have your actual reference for the audience of what the real thing looks like right there in the shot, and then you have your CG guy standing next to it, that's a real challenge as well.
Makes it tough.
Makes it very tough.
He was the thing that scared all of us so much in the beginning.
Yeah, most of the My Deformers cannot handle being able to rotate a joint in 180 degrees, and most of Sam's joints rotate at 180 degrees. So that's one reason why we realized we had to build a muscle system in the first place, is just because the My Deformers just could not handle this. And the nice thing about the muscles is you do sort of fake it. You try and keep as real as you can in most areas, but then like I think, for instance, his stomach area was basically just one huge kind of stomach blob instead of a muscle system. There was a couple muscles that were acting as the spine and the center of muscle support. But aside from that, you know, it was just basically a muscle blob in there.
He was really hard to animate because he can dislocate all his joints and stuff, so you don't even know where to begin animating him because you've got all these possibilities, and his anatomy is really strange. So I started animating like a really low kind of weird, more spidery animation, and then we started to see Brian's performance in the suit, which is a little bit more ape-like, a little bit more upright. And so we started to take the animation more towards that. Again, the guys in the suits are the main drivers of the performance, so we have to feed off of that. So at that point, we started to make them a little bit more upright. They've got this, like, he had this real powerful kind of central core that he'd walk around like that, and it was really cool and ape-like and powerful. So we started to use more of that. But every now and then you see like our Sams have a little wider spread because we can do that a little bit easier. He would kind of have some balance problems at that point. But like Guillermo really likes to mix up the practical stuff and the digital stuff so that hopefully you can't quite tell what's going on anymore, and it makes it a little bit less apparent, like, oh yeah, now we're in CG land. Oh, now we're looking at a puppet, you know. So it was always the plan to kind of have the mix of some guys are real and some guys are CG.
Shall we pull up? That would be fantastic. Turn it off. We need that lightning raised up in the air. A meter, please.
Sheet over shoulders. There's not such a thing as the other side of the bridge because there isn't. So, Ron would look over. This safety rail goes. He backs off. The safety rail goes. We discover how big this place is. He backs off and says, "Are you okay, Ivan?" And Ivan says, "If I had legs, I would kick your ass." and then, at that moment, Ron says to Lime, "Could you hold Ivan for a second?" Lime is right next to him. He goes for the rope, and we cut to the gears over there, going down. Manning goes to the door, trying to stop it. The door goes all the way down. He gets up and he comes to Hellboy and says, "Break through that door, let's go back." Because I don't think it's a good idea. I'm in charge of the expedition. I'm telling you, go back, break this door, let's go back. And then Linus, in the meantime, waiting with Ivan. And they're arguing, and between them, we see them in the back. And while they're arguing, a thing comes out of nowhere. We see the corpse turn and go, he says something like, "Oh crap," in Russian. And the pendulum takes the first section, and you both go, you're completely taken by surprise by the first thing. You don't even see the pendulum, because you're going to be running, and as you're going to go, Ron grabs you, and when he throws you, it turns you in the air. Then you slide under the door. Ron will be in the middle section, and there's a big chunk of bridge that is going to start collapsing under. That collapsing will be done by Hans on the wire, and the close-ups will be done by Ron. You know, all the running and everything that involves safety risk will be done by Hansa. All the close-up stuff will be done by Ron and you, and it will be Hansa, and you will be doubled by Charlie, who has now shaped his entire body and is ready to double you.
on.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to have one shot.
So, shall we do that close-up first then?
A lot of the stuff that we had to do to enhance what was shot on set meant that we had to replace large sections of the bridge in order to make them more dynamic and to explode and you know, come apart. So in this particular shot, we have almost, I believe, everything was replaced except for Hellboy. So we basically took Hellboy out of what was shot and put him on our digital bridge. And then we have another bridge section that we cut up into, you know, hundreds of different little pieces and chunks. And then we ran a dynamic simulation where we essentially, you know, actually simulated a pendulum hitting the bridge, and it just blew it up into little pieces, and they all flew at the camera. And then moving on to the background of that shot, there's anytime our camera moves in this environment, we're projecting these matte paintings onto all this geometry back there. And so anytime our camera moves, it obviously creates issues with what we call stretching, where the texture is stretching past beams onto other beams, and it's just creating this kind of mess back there. And so painting that out and dealing with that is another thing that we had to work on. Traditionally, matte paintings can take 4 to 8 to 12 weeks each, and we had 70 of them. So one of the things we had to do was rely on CG, traditional CG, to take us to a certain level, and then rely on matte painting much less, kind of in more of an atmosphere and look and feeling, and less on the detail side. So, you know, initially some of the things we developed really early on were procedural brick shaders and a lot of procedural textures and stuff, and trying to get like things like kind of laid out in the environment so that we had those details there for the matte painters to start from, and then they had much less of that kind of mundane stuff to do, and they went from there in a more kind of artistic way, and they were able to just add a touch of atmosphere and mood and lighting and stuff like that.
Guillermo.
Let's rehearse and we should.
You got a phone call. Here we go. No, listen.
No? Huh?
What am I supposed to do here?
Are you getting this shit? You're here. I say action.
I did this already.
No, you did not. I say action. You turn, lower your hand, and you look at rubric down there. This is we're going in reverse.
Oh.
All right?
Yeah, but I was deliberately not going to look at him until I caught the thing.
No, you should look at it every time. It looks like you're looking at him when you catch the things.
Really?
Yeah.
That was not my
Right?
intention.
Thank God.
My intention was to just catch it, to just magically know it's there.
On speed.
The animation for, you know, that sequence was all done pretty much at the same time. We would, you know, animate Behemoth, you know, rough him out with Hellboy, you know, to make sure that it's working, they're working in tandem, and the camera move.
To create a CG Hellboy and most of the digital characters, we start off with a scan of the character, and that helps in a few different ways, because number one, it is the actual actor, in this case Ron, in the Hellboy makeup. We had a full day where we made Ron up in the Hellboy makeup that he scanned, completely digital cyber scan. For Hellboy, because he's the main character, we also had to scan his head with various reactions and various looks of surprise and anger and so forth that Blair Clark from Tippett would supervise and request, knowing that an animator will need to take a character from a look of anger to scream and surprise and opening his mouth, what we call breaking the character a little bit so they can scale back. So we go open really wide and look really big, because then you can take that big look and scale it down to his straight, bored, docile look.
Generally what we do here at Tippett is we use the scans and we take them and clean them up, and basically those are used for measurements and to make sure the proportions are consistent. Recreate everything based on that, but they're used as a point of reference. Throughout the film, we referred to Mike's artwork for a lot of the specific poses, like when he jumps up, when he's going to smack the Samuel on the head. That was like Guillermo had always, like when we were shooting the plates, he was very adamant that that is got to be straight out of the comic book as far as poses. And the comic, for our work as well as for the production, it always served for the Bible of the show. It's like if there's ever a question, Guillermo would always point you to the comics. And we really adhered to that, specifically in that sequence in the multi-Samuel fight in the egg chamber, as well as in the shaft fall when Hellboy is clobbering Samuel. As they fall, there's a specific, pose where he's gonna just whack him with the stone hand.
Ron had some requests for us to, he really wanted us to have a gut punch on Samuel, underneath, like, pow, and break his ribs. So we're like, okay, we'll put that in. And then we would watch him and how he fought, because there were lots of, there's tons of footage of Ron and the Hellboy stuff beating up on imaginary Sams, or like the Sam in the suit in Subway sequence. And so we could pull little movement keys from that. Like he's got, he does a lot of this thing, bang, where he smashes on the broad side of his fist rather than the punch. And so we tried to put, like, there's some of that in all the Hellboy fights. He ends up smacking Sam on the nose and that kind of thing. And hopefully that ties the CG Ron together with the real one, just because you pick up on these similarities.
Say to this crew for a really long time now. As far as I'm concerned, you can all take the rest of the day off. Thank you!
Welcome back. Ah. Oh, what happened there?
I like the first one. The English made a mistake. Only the Mexican remains in.
Well, you made the mistake by being late, so I think we're all tied.
I made the mistake of being here. It's incredible how much younger he looks without the wing.
60 years. 60 years ago, they tried to destroy the world. They're back. In my lifetime, they're back. To finish the job.
Look at them ugly suckers, Blue. One sheet of glass between them and us.
Let's hear it.
And now here comes a garbage truck. A very large garbage truck.
Look at them ugly suckers, Blue. One sheet of glass between them and us.
Story of my life.
There's more contempt. More contempt on the line. They're like, look at them ugly suckers, Blue. They're like, they're like.
Look at them ugly suckers, Blue. One sheet of glass between them and us.
They did a lot of ADR. You can make up for situations where perhaps you had a lot of fan noise, things like that. Abe Sapien, for example, his voice is completely redone. A lot of people don't really realize how much that happens, that you can go through and you can completely replace a character's voice with someone else's voice. It's a lot of work to kind of get every little bit to kind of come together, but the primary focus is dialogue. They want to try to get the dialogue to work as well as possible.
Oh, I see. Well, that makes it all right then.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
It's really difficult to go back and get an actor to match. Really, really good actors can do it and it just goes flawlessly. But it's a really difficult process and it comes at the end and it's, you know, it's a challenge to kind of make that work. Foley generally is the interaction of people or characters with things. So the Foley in this case was a bit challenging too because a lot of these sets, you know, they're walking around, they're supposed to be walking around in stone, they're supposed to be walking around on snow. Hellboy's supposed to be this big, huge, heavy guy. His hand, every time he moves it, it has to sound like stone. There was a lot of Foley work. A good example I like to use is if someone goes and opens a car door, them grabbing the handle, that's Foley. The door opening, that's effects. The effects, very little of it is actually recorded on the set. Most of it is done after the fact. And for example, Cronin doesn't actually have all this respirator breathing when he breathes. His back doesn't actually crack when he bends over. There's guns that aren't shooting actual bullets, all these things. All of that stuff has to be redone. For example, the dream where the hospital blows up. We did a whole pass when we were pre-dubbing where we have literal explosions where you can see the fire and just there's a big ripping explosion. And then we have these really strange ones, like for example, you see fire coming at you down the hall, and that's I put in the sound of a reversed jet flying by that would give you that kind of pitched ramp up, that and that's what kind of cuts off when we cut inside of the guy, and then it blows up. So we had like a pre-dub of surreal, strange fire sounds. We had obviously a pre-dub of real sounds. We had debris pre-dub for when the place is collapsing and stuff is falling down. Actually, I think we had a couple of pre-dubs of that because you have smaller debris and you have bigger rock debris. We have glass pre-dubs. We have, you know, all of these things that have to kind of be brought together and layered and mixed. So.
I take one channel on LZ317.
I look so cute sleeping. Couldn't we do the whole movie with me like that?
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Here we go. 2 to measure 2. 1, 2.
Sometimes composers are brought on early and they really, really tempt things out pretty thoroughly. That's a really great way to work if you can do it. It's a pretty rare case that you can. usually what ends up happening is the editor is going to cut some things into their editing system, whether it's an Avid or whatever system that they use, and they'll cut music in to try and get a feel for how is this working, you know, is it driving? If it's an action scene, you cut in some action music from maybe another movie. A lot of times you're going to do a temp version of the movie where you do a mix, like a small final mix for a couple of days to get it ready for a preview. So any of you that have ever gone to a preview before and you think to yourself, I could swear that music's from another movie. Well, it is. It's like we're trying to kind of get the emotion and get the mood. And so usually because of that, you get the score kind of coming in at the end. So once you get to that final mix, you get music that generally you haven't heard before that we scored here. The Foley pre-dubs have come together. The dialogue pre-dubs have come together. All of these elements are coming together in this one room. And the director is sitting here and he's interpreting. And he's deciding what he wants to hear. And that's the place where, especially as an effects person, you really have to let go and you have to think about what's best for the movie, you know? Yeah, we did a lot of work on this whole sequence, but emotionally, with the music and with the dialogue, let's get rid of all these things, you know? Or, yeah, we bring it all together and let's just play it with the effects and see if it's working the way we want it to work. Final mixes are a pretty fun, creative place, and a lot of ideas get thrown around, and so having that flexibility with those pre-dubs is really, really important.
He's a force of nature. You just know that every single aspect of what's going into making this film is filtering through the smartest guy on the whole scene.
He had the whole movie figured out ahead of time. So it's really a matter of climbing into Guillermo's head and watching his movie and listening to his movie. And it's a scary place, by the way.
He'd show up anytime. If I got into a spot on a sculpture or at any point, he said just call me and he'd come right out, take a look at it. And the other thing I really like about him, if he doesn't like something, he tells you right away. And he has no problem with that, which I think is really great. But it could be a long night of work after that, so.
The moment I met Guillermo, I fell in love with him. We had the hugest hug, and I think everyone feels that way about Guillermo, but I'm so comfortable with him. I don't think I could find a more passionate director than Guillermo, and he just is never exhausted. He puts in 7-day weeks. He's been working on this project for years, so I have utmost faith and belief that this will just be a beautiful, beautiful film.
He's a genius when it comes to directing. I love the look of his films. It's amazing to me what he can do with an average stunt. The way he films it makes it look so much different and newer.
I fully believe in the trickle-down theory, and Guillermo del Toro being at the helm of this production definitely trickles down to all of us. His passion it comes through all of us. And him being a big fan of the comic book helps, and him being a big fan of the character Abe Sapien helps me.
His passion, it goes to everyone. You know, this set, even though we work late sometimes, we work very hard, we work 6-day weeks, we're in a foreign country, we've worked in freezing below temperature, ice cold weather with rain on us. People, you know, keep going, and they persevere, they move forward, and we laugh at the end of the day at some point, you know, after wiping away the frozen tears. And it's great. Guillermo's the best director I've ever worked with.
If you wanted to insult him, you could say that he was fat. But if you wanted to be truthful about it, I think you could say that he needs to be that size to contain his heart, because it is enormous, and his enthusiasm is colossal.